So we've talked a couple times here about gaming, so we're going to talk about a different kind of gaming, and that is running elections. So my name is Pete Martin, and as we started down this ICO process, we like to say that we are the adults in the ICO room. So I'm a very tenured executive. I work for IBM and SAP. I've sold 4 companies in my career, and started Votem about 3 years ago. Started down this path. And this is what we're trying to accomplish. Voting around the world is incredibly broken. It's very difficult. You have to, take time away to go to a polling place. It's not very accessible. And most importantly, it's not verifiable. So even if you go to a polling place and you fill out a paper ballot, you don't know when you stick that ballot in the ballot box whether it was actually counted as you intended, right? You have no idea. So that's what we're trying to fix. From an accessibility perspective, it's very difficult, as I mentioned, and so we're trying to fix that as well so that you can vote much more easily. So we're focused on 2 problems we're trying to solve. The first is trust. Trust in elections is at an all-time low around the world and in governments in general. And we've had 3 extreme, incredible democracy, what we call crises this year. The first one is in Venezuela, where when Maduro announced the results from the last presidential campaign, the voting systems vendor that did the voting actually pulled all their people out a couple days later, then announced to the world that the results that were actually tallied on the machines were not the same ones that he presented. Okay, incredible. Kenya happened exactly the same thing, and they had to go to the Supreme Court in Kenya and redo it. Here in the US, unprecedented, we have a president who won, who contested the results. Like, that's never happened before, right? He thinks 3 million people should have been counted and, whatever. So it's kind of crazy. So trust is down at an all-time low. So we're focused on that. And then we're also focused on access, making voting a lot easier so either you can vote more often or more people vote, okay? And we think our platform does that. So it's made up of 2 pieces, the VAST token, which we'll talk about what that is in just a second, and then what we call the cast iron platform. VAST, the V-A-S-T, stands for verifiability, accessibility, security, and transparency. And those 2 things go together. We're in our private pre-sale phase right now. This is a SAFT, which is a simple agreement for future tokens. Other folks have talked about that, so you do need to be an accredited investor to get involved. We've seen incredibly good response, and we really just kicked this off about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. There's a lot of interest in solving this problem. This is a huge social impact globally, and it's a $10 billion market opportunity. And there's finally some technology that solves many of the fundamental problems that have kept this industry from moving forward. In the US specifically, most of the voting machines that, if you're in the US that you voted on, are 10 to 12 years old. There was a lot of money given by the federal government in 2003, and most of that money was spent by states. And a commission under Obama was formed in 2014, and basically what they said is by the end of this year, virtually all the machines in this country are going to be end of life. And what we're seeing is states are starting to replenish all their voting machines. So we're actually jointly bidding on a project for LA County that is replacing all their voting machines, and it's a $150 million project, just one county in California. And this is going on pretty much around the country. So it's a massive market opportunity in the US and beyond. That's on the public election side. On the private election side, voting is happening all the time with all kinds of organizations, from labor unions to private associations and beyond. And this is a massive market that is basically made up of vendors that throw up a website and say you can go do voting, SurveyMonkey on steroids. And the level of verifiability and transparency isn't there either. And in regulated markets like labor unions, you have to be certified. Okay, our platform will work in both. In the same spirit, what's been very interesting about this industry is that all of the vendors that serve this industry pretty much have platforms that will not go across borders. So the North American elections vendors, their platform will not work outside the US. The European vendors don't have a platform that will work outside Europe because voting happens very differently globally. So we are the first vendor to actually take all the requirements globally and make it flexible enough that it can literally work pretty much around the world. And it can be extended for languages and those local weird jurisdictional laws on how you run votes in that particular jurisdiction. From the blockchain perspective, I'm talking to a blockchain audience, you guys know this, but CivTech or GovTech, a lot of governments are looking at blockchain to solve lots of different issues. Voting is one of them, and a survey from IBM sometime late last year, basically they surveyed I think 160 different government leaders, and a bunch of them said, A, we're doing blockchain, and B, we think voting is a perfect use case for this. So I mentioned that we're a 3-year-old company. We acquired a company about 2 years ago, and we actually ran the elections in the presidential election last year for 3 states and Washington, D.C. So if you're in the military or overseas in those states that we had business in, you actually voted on our platform. And I can tell you, that we're going to show up one of the emails, it is incredibly rewarding to get emails from people in the military saying, I'm on a ship in the Mediterranean, I've never been able to vote before, thank God this exists, because this is the first time I voted in the 9 tours that I've had. Incredibly rewarding. So in the last really 20 months of operations, we've completed 11 elections. We now have 8.5 million votes on our platform. There's nobody that's even close to that. We are years ahead of everybody in terms of what we've accomplished. And right now we have 3 products in market. So this is, we got some press. This is back in September, October. PH Midori is an analyst with Crypto Coin News and basically said, we're far and above beyond anybody, and that in the not too distant future, this is the way people are going to start voting. Okay? We do this for a lot of people because you end up doing these PowerPoint charts and everybody's like, is there really a product here? So we took a snapshot back in the fall. This is one of the dashboards for some of the elections we use. We removed some of the stuff to protect the innocent, if you will. But this is real stuff that's happening today. Okay? Got a lot of press, which is great. And again, this is a social problem that people know needs to be fixed. And this is one of my most favorite emails that we got, who basically said they've never been able to vote before. They voted on our platform, and thank you to the Secretary of State for that particular state for enabling them to be able to do that. Okay? Let's talk about the token itself for a second. So we mentioned that there's these 4 attributes or characteristics of this token. The trick in this game of moving this industry forward, because it's full of legacy vendors and there's a lot of negative inertia or resistance to any kind of change. So the way we are attacking this is making our platform as verifiable as an in-polling place, paper-based election. That's not an easy effort. So it's really focused on these 4 things. One is around the verifiability. So there are organizations around the world that monitor and oversee elections. So if you're Pakistan or you're Afghanistan, you'll call in one of these organizations. They will literally stick monitors out into the field, in the polling places, and make sure that you're running a fair and free election. They're on our platform. So they can validate every vote that comes in real time. If you're the Oscars and you have PwC, I probably should mention this, or the SAG Awards from last night, we are signing up large accounting firms that then can also audit and verify the elections in real time. We did an election in the summer for 400,000 votes, and in the past they had their accounting firm check all the votes, do the auditing, whatever, and they would certify the votes a couple of weeks after the election was over. This year, they certified it in 20 minutes. Okay? It's incredible stuff. So that's number 1. Number 2 is, this isn't necessarily a blockchain thing. This is mobile and online, but again, making voting a little bit easier, making it incredibly secure, and the e-voting machines, so if you go in and you vote on a tablet, the issue with those is not that they're not secure, because most of them are, and there's operational processes to make sure they are, but if you're compromised, you have no idea, right? With our platform, if you're ever compromised, you will know immediately, and you can expunge those ballots and then kind of do them manually through what's called a provisional ballot process, right? Then from a transparency perspective, Most laws will prohibit you from actually having real-time results, but we've got about 4 audit points in our platform, including on a sidechain on Ethereum, so that if you're an auditor of elections or you're just the general public, you can go audit this stuff, okay? Incredibly transparent. So these are the components of our platform. So the first one is this cast iron platform, and there are a couple of other companies that did blockchain voting ICOs before us. And nice guys, I'm not going to take anything away from them, but they don't know anything about running an election. Elections are incredibly complex. So let me give you an example. So in Montana, they have 64 counties, right? Based on your precinct, in Montana alone, there's about 1,500 different ballots we have to serve you based on your precinct, based on federal issues, state, local, county, muni, tax bonds, school district, whatever, okay? I've never talked to a blockchain guy that knows that. So we've put together a really nice team of elections people, technology blockchain people, and industry folks that all together can create this kind of a platform and make it that flexible to work around the world. We're also open sourcing a protocol called Proof of Vote. It's similar to proof of stake, but there are some very specific characteristics that elections officials want to see to in fact demonstrate and verify and audit the fact that your vote was cast as intended and it was tallied as you cast it. And so we're building a protocol around this that we're open sourcing and we're getting feedback on from elections people and blockchain people, of course, all right? We talked about the VAST token. I'll tell you what it does in just 1 second. And then a lot of people ask us what blockchain framework we're using. Currently, we're using Tendermint. We may or may not switch that, but essentially the way this works is we create a Genesis block on Ethereum, but we run the election on a private permission-based blockchain. I can tell you I've never met an elections person, even of private organizations, that's comfortable putting their votes out on the open network. It's just not going to happen. So we're very pragmatic about this. Once the election's over, then we will, in the votes are tallied, we will report the results back up on a sidechain on Ethereum. But operationally, this whole thing happens on a permission-based blockchain. Okay? In terms of the VAST token itself, it does really 2 things. It gives you access to the platform, of course. And the challenge we had creating this thing really revolved around the fact that there's a huge difference in the complexity of different types of elections. So we've run the fan vote for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where people from 100 different countries on mobile online voted in the millions, okay? All they really wanted was we're validating the email address. Not that it was a person, just that it was a real email address. You move all the way to Washington, D.C., in the elections we ran for them last year, it's incredibly more complex. So essentially what the VAST token does is allows you to have different levels of verifiability based on the complexity of your election. So if you want anonymity, we have to shuffle those ballots before we tally them. If you want the voter to verify through a QR code to a public website that the vote was cast as they intended it, you need a token for that. If you want to decrypt and encrypt your ballots and then have a mathematical proof that we did that properly, you need a token for that. So the amount of tokens you need really depends on the level of complexity, and you need it per ballot. And so that way, and in theory, a more complex election should be more expensive than a simple election, right? And so we accomplish that through the way we built the token. All right? From a token economics perspective.
So sorry to interrupt, but we do not have that many time left, okay?
What's that? Okay, 2 more minutes, promise. From the token economics perspective, the way we price this is that you buy your tokens up front to run an election. They're frozen during that period of the election. After that, you can use them again for as long as you want. So as long as you're running elections, your marginal cost of running election goes down dramatically, okay? We're building a community around this. We talked about the SAF sale, and that's really pretty much it. And so if you're interested in participating, you can email me at pmartin@votem.com. We've got an amazing group of advisors. Goon Surir is the guy who found the hack in the DAO. He's really well recognized in the blockchain space. Michael Barrett was the former chief security officer of PayPal. Peter Haynes was one of Bill Gates' technical advisors. Steve Babbage is the head of cryptography for Vodafone in the UK. And Craig Burton was the guy who basically created the first e-voting system 14 years ago. Amazing, amazing people, okay? And we've got an incredible management team as well there. All right? There's my contact info if you want to talk. Feel free.